Hey everybody, welcome back to Do Game Stuff. Today I'm going to show you how to make an easy day-night cycle in your game. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and create this new game. We're going to go to Create New. We're going to use the wizard for this. We're going to do 3D landscape. For this, we're going to use an observer template. Free roaming. No controls. No controls on that either. But we're going to bring in this sun guy right here. So we're going to use that because I like it. Normal physics is fine. And for, contrast, we use grass and then our tree because we like nice little things here. So when we open it up, we're going to go straight to our 3D world. If I can get my computer to work, here we go. And this is the scene we're greeted with. Using the wizard, we have now our big old sunset sky right there in the way. So what we want to do is we want to line up our camera with our sunset sky within our perspective here. Now, we have character, since we have free roaming, and then we have the camera and sunset all parented and childed to each other, so that no matter where you move in the scene, all of these things are going to follow you. So that's important to remember for this kind of thing, especially with the backdrop. So I'm going to select my sunset object, add a brain box. I'm going to scroll down to rotate. And here in the Z-axis, I'm going to select 0 because I don't want it to move on the Z-axis. Now, the way rotation works is a little funny. Whenever you rotate around an axis, you're not actually rotating on the axis. So I'm going to explain to you how this works. So we've got the green arrow here, which is the y-axis. The red is the x-axis, and of course blue is the z-axis. Now that's not entirely the way it works in rotation. When you're rotating on an axis, you're not rotating on it, you're rotating around it. Now the color scheme is a little different here. If I move this left or right, I'm actually rotating around the z-axis, right? And then when I rotate from another color, like I said, it's weird how they have the color set up. So I'm actually going to be rotating around the y-axis when I move that. Now when I move the blue is rotating around the y-axis, you can see up here in the top right, as the values there change. And then the red, of course, that's the only one that seems like it's correct here. Whenever I move the red one, I'll be rotating around the x-axis. But right now, green, I'll be rotating around the z-axis, just like that. As you can see, the values change. And whenever I rotate around the y-axis, that color is blue for some reason, and I don't understand why that is. But as you can see here, the x-axis is the one I'm wanting to actually rotate around. So I'll be rotating around the axis, and I'll pan over here to kind of show you an example of that. See, I'll be rotating around that axis. I won't be rotating on it, just around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line us back up. Set all these back to 0, and then on this move node, I'm going to set it, since we're moving in a negative direction, and I'll show you how you can find that out here. Just click on it, move your rotation in either direction, and pay attention to the values, whether it goes positive or negative. Since I want to go negative, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my move node right here. I'm going to put this in a -10, and I'm putting it in -10. It's kind of fast for rotation for a day-night cycle, just for the purposes of demonstration. So now when I click play the scene, you can see here in the background, and I'll need to adjust my camera here in a minute so you can see it a little better, but you can see now that background is rotating and gives that kind of a feel of a day-night cycle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click my camera icon, pan it up just a little bit so I kind of have a field of view here that makes kind of sense, some kind of sense. And then I'm going back to my sunset. Make sure you uncheck the camera so you don't mess that up. I'm going to go into my my move tool here. I'm going to bring this in closer to me to give a nice big immersive feel, so that's not very big. And I'm going to go ahead and scale it up a bit. Now, whenever you do, you want to make sure that when you move it, so most of those grid lines disappear, because if you don't, sometimes what it'll do is they'll give you a big gray area that doesn't make sense. In this case, it didn't. But as you can see now that I've got my camera panned up, where you can see the night sky and the day sky as it rotates around, and you can play with that as you want to, depending on how you want your game to act. But for me, I'm going to bring this closer still, so I can have that big night sky when it comes in. Of course, you can bring in your own sky assets. This one's just the default one. So if you want to, you can bring in your own sky asset, or make a giant sphere, put a day-night sunset sky kind of thing on it, and achieve the same results. And you can tell here, you have to be kind of careful about how close you bring it into your scene, because then it'll start overlapping your scene. So we'll move that back just a little bit, so it can stop cutting it off there. But I think I might be kind of happy with that. I might scale it up just a little bit more, to give that big sky feel. And then of course I'll move it. And again, sometimes if you make it too big and bring it too close, you'll have that cut off. But right now it's not doing that. It did it to me earlier, but that's something you want to be mindful of there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, now we have our rotating sky, and it gives us our day and night cycle. But what I'm going to do now, for just that little extra immersion, I'm going to take my sun light here, and I'm going to try to rotate it in a manner that kind of reflects the day-night cycle. Now, since it's not really an object, I can't add a node to it, so I'm going to have to use the animation panel, which is down here. Now, I'm going to show you how to do an animation real quick. Same thing applies with rotation here. It's really funny how you do it. Since my sky is moving in a negative direction, I want to move my sunlight in a negative direction as well. So I'm going to click record, make sure it's clicked, and that's going to give us a keyframe here by just tapping a value. And I have 100 frames here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 25 and move it to about where I want it, and then 50, and then move it some more to about where I want it. And then after that, I'm going to go to 75 and move it to where I want it. And anytime you make an adjustment while this record button is on, in the lower left-hand side of the animation panel, anything you do after that's going to be recorded. So you'll have a green keyframe that pops up down there. And you'll want to make sure the Y and the Z values are 0. Otherwise, it's going to give you kind of a weird rotation animation, and you don't want that. Or maybe you do. It's up to you. And then, of course, the last one here, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to close to the original position. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you something that's a little bit easier to do. But for now, I want to play you this animation and show you kind of what adjusting it like that does. See, we have kind of a funny motion. And I'm going to show you how to fix that here in just a minute. So I'm going to go back to my keyframes. I'm going to make sure, oops, I did the wrong thing here. Hold on a second. I changed the position factor. Well, change the position factor. So I need to reset that. So, and this is a good kind of a way to show you how to fix a mistake. So I'm going to go to my next keyframe and make note of that value, go back to my original keyframe, and place that value in there. Just like that 3, oh, nope, it's 1 8, not 8 1. And then I'm going to go check the Z value, and it's 3.001. I'm going to go back to my original position here and type in negative 3.001. So now it's back to normal. Okay, so since we're moving in a negative direction, let me go ahead and check all these real quick to make sure. Since we're moving in a negative direction, let me make sure all of these are set to 0 because we don't want that wobbly effect. So now when we play it real quick, now we got, it's a little better, but there's a reason it's doing that way instead of the way we want it, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my keyframes at the starting keyframe. I'm going to go ahead and manually type this in. I'm going to type it, the X value to 0, because that's where it was originally. The next one, you would think would be 90 degrees, but it's not, and I'll show you why that's not right. Because what it's going to do is going to try to move in a positive direction instead of a negative direction. So we want to do something different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, see, we want it to move in a negative direction, so we need a negative value here. Otherwise, it's going to try to rotate and then try to go back to a different direction. We don't want that. We want a smooth animation. And then from here, we want negative 180. And then you would think also that this would be 90, positive 90, since it's in a positive position. But since we are rotating in a negative direction, that's actually going to be negative 90. I'll show you why that's a problem. So now we have a smooth animation all the way up until it tries to go to positive 90. So what it does is it's going to rotate in the opposite direction. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead, and it's not going to be 90, it's not going to be negative 90, it's going to be actually negative 270. Yeah, I believe it's 270. So we start at position 0, we go negative 90, and then negative 180, and now negative 270. And as we can see now, see, it's starting to kind of act right up until we get to the last keyframe, because instead of going back to position 0, well, it's going in a positive direction to 0. And, you know, some people would think that negative 1 would fix that. Well, that's not the case either, because it's still going to rotate in a positive direction until it gets back to the negative 1 position. And I'll show you from here what that's going to do, and make sure all my values are still the same. So we have a good rotation all the way up to this point. Then it rushes back to negative 1. Well, actually, what we need to do, since we're moving in that negative direction, is we actually need to go negative 360 degrees. So let's type in negative 360. So now what we have is we have a solid rotation that's going 360 degrees in a negative direction. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing animations like this. So now that we've got that fixed up, and the same applies also whenever you're doing positive directions, you just don't put in the negative number. But you can see right here, there's a little bit more immersion right here. As the day turns to night and the night turns to day, that shadow that the sunlight is casting kind of reflects that. And you might want to make some adjustments on it too. I think I may have gone in the wrong direction for that, to be realistic, but you kind of get the idea of what we're going for here. And then also, this is just sunlight. This wants to light up the whole area there. There are different lighting sources we can use, such as point light and spotlight, which is down here. Uh, and each one of those has different lighting values. Um, your point light uh, is going to obviously put a direct light on something. Your spotlight's going to be more of a coned shape. And I can show you the difference here real quick. So as I rotate this, well, you're not going to be able to see it. Let me change the intensity by a lot, for no reason. And I'm going to go ahead, I'll go ahead and bring it over the tree so you can kind of see what difference it makes. So as I'm positioning this light, you can kind of see here on the edge of the tree that it's really affecting the shadow that's casted and the light that's casted on the tree. But watch what happens when I change the intensity and then rotate it. See, now you can see that the light is being cast on each side of the tree respectively. And that's a point light, and that really makes a difference in your lighting aspects. And then you can move it side to side and kind of get an idea of what kind of field of light you've got. So that's one thing you can try out with that too. And then we've got the spotlight that has a little bit different of a lighting value. And it changes based on distance from the object that is being shown on. So these are different things you can play with, different light sources you can play with to really get that immersive feel for a good day-night cycle. But we're not going to go ahead and not reanimate everything else. I just wanted to show you the difference between these lights here and how to make a good day-night cycle. Let me just go ahead and delete those. But now in our scene, when we play it, we have a rotating sky that gives the illusion that we're on a planet that's rotating and giving us a good day-night cycle. Along with that shadow play from the sunlight that kind of helps with that. So I hope you learned something from this, and if you have any other suggestions for any tutorials, leave a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe and visit us on Discord. And until next time, y'all have fun.